Okay, Q&A number 1. Here is the question. Whenever I try to write a song, I always end up getting stuck and not finishing it. I can never finish anything in life. Should I just kill myself? No, you should not kill yourself. In fact, this is a really common problem. This is something I've dealt with many times myself. Basically, every private student I've ever had has asked me this question in some form. But it's frustrating. When I get, you kind of want to kill yourself when this keeps happening over and over again. It feels like, I'm just terrible at this. I can't, finish any songs. I should just give up. But if you think about it, it's actually not surprising that we often get stuck when we're doing something like writing a song. Whenever you're doing any sort of big creative project, like writing a song or an album or writing a book or, doing paintings, any sort of creative process, there are so many different decisions you have to make along the way and so many potential roadblocks that can come up. It's just really likely that you're going to get stuck on one of those because there's all these challenges ahead and you have to tackle all of them and you have to, find good solutions to every single one before you can finish the piece. So if you don't have a very clear, methodical approach to kind of ensure that you can deal with all of these issues as they come up, you're just probably going to have a difficult time. So it makes sense. It's very common. Now, I should say, everyone's brains work differently, and everyone has different approaches to writing music. And like I said, there are many different things that can go wrong. So without actually, speaking with you personally and seeing your personal approach, it's going to be impossible for me to tell you exactly what you should do specifically to, ensure that you can actually finish songs. But in my personal experience and the experience I've had with working with private students, I've seen a couple of things that keep coming up as like really common problems. So what I'm about to say might not solve the problem for all of you, but hopefully it'll be relevant to a lot of you. So the most common issue I see with people getting stuck when they're trying to write music, the most common reason for that is that we tend to be too detail-oriented at the beginning of the composition process. So let me unpack that a little bit. So if you think about what appeals to the average listener in music, it's the flashy stuff like the melodies, the chord progressions, the grooves. And those really are just musical details. Those are not really the heart and soul of the piece. They're not the structure of the piece. So when you sit down to write a piece of music, the kind of intuitive approach is to just kind of, go to the piano or pick up a guitar and just start trying to work out a melody or trying to figure out a chord progression. And you're just kind of feeling around, you're improvising, and you're hoping that something good will come out, and you're hoping that you'll kind of develop a song along the way. And sometimes it works. There have been many great pieces of music written that way. A lot of composers write exclusively that way. But sometimes it doesn't work. It's just you're kind of rolling the dice when you do that. You're hoping that something good will come out. It's not a very consistent, methodical approach. So I used to write music like that, and it was very hit or miss, like I was saying. And what really helped me kind of break out of that and become much more consistent as a composer was a quote, actually, by Maurice Ravel, who is a French composer, of course. Many of you have probably heard of him. Great composer. Would highly recommend you listen to his music if you have not. But anyway, here's what he said. He said, "I begin by considering an effect." So he doesn't begin by, writing a melody or, coming up with a chord progression. He takes a step back and he says, okay, what am I trying to accomplish here? What's the purpose of this piece of music? What's the effect I want this piece to have? And that really, it's a simple statement, and it makes sense if you think about it, but it's actually really, really useful advice. So I always tell people, think of when you're crafting a song or a piece of music, think about that as being analogous to building a house. Okay, so imagine you're building a house. What you wouldn't do when you're building a house is just pick up a bunch of random pieces of wood and start nailing nails into them and kind of connecting them haphazardly and hoping that a house arises. Again, it's possible that could work. You might just end up with a house if you're lucky, but it's very unlikely. And it's even less likely that even if you do end up with a house, it's probably not going to be optimized. It's probably not going to be the best possible house you could make. So actually what happens when you're building a house is you don't start with nailing nails into wood, which would be like the melodies and the chords. Those are the details. What you do is you start with a blueprint. You conceptualize the house before you start actually executing anything. You just think about, what's the purpose of this building? Who's going to be living there? How many floors does it have? How many rooms are going to be on each floor? What's the layout of each floor? What's the purpose of each room? You're thinking about big picture ideas, and you're actually writing this all out. You're creating a plan for yourself that you can then execute. So it's a much more organized approach. So again, starting with the big picture, thinking about the most important things in the piece or in the house or whatever, and then kind of slowly zooming in on the details more and more over time. So let's bring it back to music for a second. So again, you don't want to start with just kind of improvising at the piano every time. You can do that sometimes, but again, you're kind of rolling the dice when you do that, in my experience at least. So what you want to do is ask yourself some big picture questions up front. Think about, why am I even writing this song? Who am I writing this song for? Are you writing for yourself? Are you writing for your friend? Are you writing for a specific demographic? Are you scoring a scene in a film? What's the purpose of this music? And then further, what's the specific experience you want that audience to have when they hear this piece? Do you want them to feel sad? Do you want them to feel like they want to dance? Do you want them to get some sort of political message? What are you trying to do with this piece? What's the purpose? And I think you'll notice if you answer those questions before you start actually writing notes on the page or, playing chords on the guitar, the song actually starts to kind of write itself. It will just start to take shape, and it'll make the whole process so much more organized and easier to deal with. So, I'll literally write out all these things. Like I'll answer these questions and I'll start to sketch out a roadmap, like a blueprint for the song. I'll start thinking about how long I want it to be, where the different sections will be, the purposes of each section, the kind of gestures that happen, the ups and downs along the way. And I'll literally write this all out on paper. And then, again, I haven't written any notes yet. I haven't touched an instrument. I just am conceptualizing. And then once I have that blueprint, then once you take that to the piano and you start coming up with chord progressions, well, you know exactly what you're trying to accomplish at every moment in the piece. You know which chords will work best to achieve that certain effect you have in mind. And everything just becomes so much easier. Every decision that comes up that you have to make, it just kind of makes itself because you have a clear goal. So you just say, okay, every time I'm at a crossroads in the process, do I take this road or do I take that road? Well, you just think about whichever road leads you to your goal, and you have a very clear answer every time. So it's just much less likely you're going to get stuck in any sort of significant way at any moment during the process. So that would be my main advice. Begin by considering an effect. Follow Ravel's footsteps here. Here's a very consistent, methodical composer. So hopefully that helps. Again, there are many other things that could be going wrong, but this is one of the most common ones in my experience that I see, and this advice helped me personally. So hopefully that applies to some of you as well. Good luck and have fun. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. Also check out my Patreon page. The purpose of this channel is to offer free music education to the world, and your contributions make that possible.